Hello and welcome, Max Mathias here. I apologize immediately. I have a cold while I'm recording this, so if I sound nasally or anything like that, I'm sorry. So, you are watching this because you are considering an economics major. I will answer some questions regarding that, give you an idea of what it's like. But first, I'd like a disclaimer. My viewpoints in this are entirely my own, right? This is based on my experience going through undergrad and then ultimately grad school, right? Importantly, what you get out of any college major depends on what you put in it. There is no silver bullet, right? Being an economics major guarantees you'll be successful or anything like that. It all depends on, how much effort you put into it. I know, kind of cheesy to start the video, but that's how it goes. So, why consider economics? Well, first, the median salary in 2022 is $113,000, almost $114,000. That comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, a lot of economists or people who graduate with economics degrees, they tend to do well financially. Average GRE score, so this I believe is the graduate records exam. This is the general test to get into grad school. It scored from 130 to 170. So 154 verbal above the above average, and then 160 quant is very good as well. So economists generally do well on the GRE. Average LSAT, if you're considering law school, 158.8. I know that I want to say the 90th percentile is like 165. So again, econ majors do pretty well on the LSAT. And then the GMAT, which is to get into business school, 563.3. This comes from a paper by Nelson and Monson. It's pretty old. I think the GMAT now scores it a little bit differently. But again, this is well above average and also much higher than other social sciences or humanities. So why am I giving you all of these statistics to start? Generally, what I'm trying to just convey here is that all of this is pretty much to say you can do anything with an economics degree, right? It's a very broad major. I would probably also consider it to be the most versatile major that you're going to potentially take in college. The only thing it doesn't kind of directly prepare you for is something like med school. Right. Notice I didn't put the MCAT scores in here. I don't know how economists do. I could go look. All of this information obviously is available online, but that is a very kind of targeted graduate, exam. So what does the major look like? Obviously, this varies school by school, but this is the general idea from what I've seen, in my undergrad, grad school, and looking at other things. So required classes you're going to take are 2 principles levels classes. So usually microeconomics and principles of macroeconomics. Sometimes these get combined, right? Micro is the study of household and firm behavior, how they interact with each other. Sometimes it's also just called price theory, right? Basically, it's markets, supply, demand, things that you think of when you think of economics. Macroeconomics deals with macro means big, right? So things like interest rate, inflation, unemployment, all of those really interesting things that you encounter day to day when you're listening to the news, listening to politicians, things like that. You also have to take an intermediate sequence of micro and macro. The best way I can describe these, intermediate micro is you're relearning the same things you learned in principle, just at a little bit higher, more technical level. Basically, that means adding a little bit of math. Don't freak out when you hear math. I'll talk about what you need. Unless you're planning on doing a PhD or something crazy, you don't need a lot of math. Intermediate macro will actually branch out a little bit. Again, more math than you would get in principles of macro, but you're also going to be covering new topics, while intermediate micro really doesn't expand the breadth of what you learn in principles. It just goes a little bit deeper. And then usually you'll have an econometrics or an econ statistics class. Again, it depends on where you go. This is basically learning the field of econometrics, which is basically applied statistics, right? Using statistics, regression, things like that, and applying it to economic questions. Then you'll see a lot of things which we generally call field classes or are your electives. This is a lot of stuff to talk about. So public, labor, trade, industrial organization, game theory, poverty or inequality, a history of thought, or you can even take advanced micro or macro courses depending on where you're going at. If you're curious, I don't want this video to run on. I could talk about all of these different subfields of economics all day. But if you have questions, let me know. And I'm happy to basically tell you, I think, the pros and cons. If you want to know what I personally do in my day-to-day, it's in the area of basically public and labor. Education econ is a mix of public and labor economics. I also do, some schools have an economics of education class you can also take. Highly recommend that. It's a lot of fun. So what is the math that you'll need to get through the econ major? Well, if you're not planning on doing an MA or a PhD, you're going to need calculus, but that's basically pretty much it, right? And really, even in univariate calculus, the power rule is usually enough to get you through, right? And so that is if you have a function, x to the power n, then its derivative is n, x to the power n minus 1. Maybe multivariate calculus, depending on how high you want to go. Some intermediate classes do multiple variables. I don't think multivariate calculus is that much more intense than univariate calculus. So if you're on the fence, maybe do it, but it's not something that you probably need. And then a general statistics class. Obviously, I'm saying this is for, an MA or PhD in econ. I generally think statistics is good to take anyways, but some econ departments will have their own, right? I personally would recommend, if you're kind of going for something, stats for engineer is a good balance of mathematical rigor without being too crazy, but you can take, stats for social sciences, things like that. Those are also totally fine. Highly recommend taking statistics. If you're planning on an MA or PhD in econ, I will make my own video specifically about this in the future, but just quickly for people who are, potentially thinking grad school all the way and I want to do it in economics, all the math you can take. And I really mean that. Linear algebra, absolutely. A proofs class, if you are looking at PhDs, they will tell you to take something like real analysis. You don't need that. I didn't have it, but you do need to learn how to do some mathematical proofs. I would recommend taking calculus all the way up through differential equations. DiffyQ itself, I used maybe once or twice in grad school, but I'm glad I took it. And then all the stats classes. And really for those, focus on the ones that are in the math department where it is deriving things. Again, not a lot of fun, maybe scaring some people away. I'm just letting you know, if you want to go the PhD route in economics, you're going to have to do a lot of math. So what is my opinion? Well, a lot of college majors teach you a kind of toolkit, so to speak, that you would apply at a future job. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you are doing something like accounting or finance in a business school, you learn the principles of accounting, you learn the principles of finance, you go and you do that, right? So obviously part of learning this toolkit is learning the jargon of a particular occupation. Economics, we have our own jargon as well, but you basically learn how to do accounting or you learn how to do finance and you go off and you do that. I think economics is unique in that it teaches you a way to think about the world. And that is this kind of quintessential thinking like an economist, marginal reasoning, cost-benefit analysis, things like that. I think econ is unique in that way. And things that you're doing, so like unless you're a teacher like me, you'll never be drawing supply demand or other graphs in your day-to-day life, right? No one is going to say like, hey, Max, we have this business thing coming up. What do you think we should do? And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to be drawing supply demand and talking about price changes, right? That doesn't happen unless you're teaching. But that economic mindset is valuable no matter what you do. And one thing that immediately just comes to mind when I think about it is whenever I have to go see the doctor for anything, like let's say, my knee hurts or something, doctors have a really weird mindset where they want to order all of these tests without thinking about the costs and the benefits of doing that, right? So like my wife and I have gotten into this habit of basically saying, well, if you do this test, what will that tell you to do, right? Or what recommendations would you give? So essentially, what is the benefit of doing this test? Is it something that we now are able to screen out X or Y problem versus the cost, not only of my time, but also, insurance, right? You're going to pay a lot of money. So a lot of things they totally don't think about that idea of cost-benefit analysis of doing tests or doing procedures or doing things a certain way that as an economist, to me, is just second nature. I also think that classes like econometrics are going to give you real-world skills that are highly in demand. I worked a couple industry jobs. I worked as basically a director of quantitative research, very fancy title, at a market research firm, and then I also was a director of econometrics at a media firm. In both of those instances, they really cared about my econometrics chops, my ability to do statistics, math, things like that. If you're curious about what that entailed, let me know. I'm happy to talk to you about those jobs as well. So, is economics right for you? I'm going to cop out here. It depends. Most important, though, is do what you enjoy. Honestly. Like, if you don't like econ, then don't do it, right? If you enjoy something else, if you enjoy art, if you enjoy theater, if you enjoy engineering, do that, right? The way that my wife likes to think about this, she thinks of economics as basically being equivalent to tequila. You either love it or you hate it. I'm not going to go that far, but I will say economics is unique in the sense that for some people, it just clicks. It's common sense. I was lucky enough to have that. And so for me, it never really felt like I had to work that hard at the undergraduate level to do this kind of stuff. Whenever I learned something new, it felt like second nature and, really like common sense. And I loved it, right? And it felt immediately applicable to the real world. If you hate it or if it's not clicking, that doesn't mean that, economics is not right for you. Like if you have to work at it, but you enjoy it, do it, right? I'm not going to talk you out of it. However, even if you don't pursue econ, and I will be the first person to tell you economics is not for everyone as a major, I highly recommend taking a Principles of Micro Macro class as a general education course. Why? You're going to learn to critically evaluate arguments that politicians, the media, whatever, use to tout certain agendas, right? And you'll be able to immediately spot, solid reasoning versus kind of BS, faulty reasoning in advocating a certain policy or viewpoint or something like that, right? It is giving you informative skills that are basically just going to make you better at interacting with the world around you. Okay, so if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them, but thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time.